Semenya isn't male, but in addition to Y chromosome, she is believed to have internal testes and lack a womb or ovaries. What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about the Olympic athletes that were just banned in the races they were specialized in for having too high of testosterone levels. These individuals had levels above the 5 nanomole per liter cutoff, which is about 144 nanograms per deciliter if I recall correctly, and they did not sustain a level below that for a long enough period of time, hence categorizing them as essentially, you know, something that is performance enhancing above and beyond basic, like, I guess, PCOS or basic, you know, any kind of thing that could be justified as a female level. So the only thing is, like, yes, the reference range for females only goes up to, like, I don't know, 70 nanograms per deciliter or something like that. But there are, you know, genetic outliers who will produce, you know, just like a male, you could find males who produce 1500, 1600 nanograms per deciliter, which is significantly outside the reference range. And those guys, as far as I know, aren't going to be banned from sport. You're going to find individuals who are female biologically and produce, you know, 80, 90, 100, 110, you know, above the reference range, super physiological levels. However, the 5 nanomole per liter cutoff at 144 is kind of where they deem it to be too much, whereby you are essentially crossing into intersex territory, it seems like, because some new, it's not really new data, but to be honest, it's just more context given to me that I wasn't really aware of when it comes to the actual chromosomes of these individuals. So one thing we're going to be referencing first is Caster Semenya, which is the, you know, most notable case in which an individual was banned from sport due to the fact that they had excessively high testosterone levels. Now, the thing that makes it harder to report accurately on this is that none of these news outlets seem to either disclose and or have access to an accurate representation of their hormonal profile. We just know they're exceeding this cutoff, but it's like, by what? You know, if they have 145 nanograms per deciliter versus 1,000, there's a big fucking difference, you know? So it would kind of depend on, you know, what my stance is. And in addition to that, the actual structural shit going on down there is what we're going to be getting into too, because I was not aware that Caster Semenya actually has XY chromosomes. So this is a good article by Robert Johnson. It's from a couple of years ago, and this is, you know, not the athletes in question right now, but Caster Semenya, you know, the topic has been a hot trending topic for a while. And they laid out some very interesting points that I was unaware of, and then kind of related it back to the stuff we are aware of and tied it into a nice little, I don't know, not a present, but like, I don't even know. Tied it up into a nice fucking rap thing. Let me start by saying none of what I wrote below should be viewed as a personal attack on Caster Semenya. Let's see, writing this column as I feel the average person who hasn't been following the situation, woke up yesterday, see headlines in newspapers and on websites across the globe, likely has no idea what's going on. Mainstream reporting of Semenya is very misleading, to say the least, so let me share a few key facts that you likely haven't read anywhere else. So this is Caster Semenya flexing her muscles at the pre-classic in 2018. So Caster Semenya has XY chromosomes. I didn't know that, you know, it's not heavily reported that it's just said like, oh, this individual is high test, you know, and they were not below their cutoff. It's not identified that their actual, like, how they have developed as a human is pretty significantly different. And the amount of hormones secreted might be, you know, like drastically over the cutoff for all we know. And their actual genetic makeup is very unique in that, again, XY chromosomes. So it's absolutely mind-boggling that virtually every major outlet in the world reporting the Court of Arbitration for Sport ruling yesterday has failed to mention one of the most important facts of the entire case. Caster Semenya has XY chromosomes. It was generally accepted by people following the case closely that Semenya was XY, but now it's been confirmed as fact since the CAS press release specifically says the DSD covered by the regulations are limited to athletes with 46 XY DSD, i.e. conditions where the affected individual has XY chromosomes. If she wasn't XY, the IAAF's regulations wouldn't apply to her and she'd have no reason to challenge them. In case you forgot what you learned in junior high biology, typically females have XX chromosomes while males are XY. How the Associated Press, Reuters, New York Times, NPR, Washington Post, and BBC could all leave this crucial fact out of the reporting is beyond me. Not a single one of them mentioned it at all. It should have been in the lead paragraph of every story so people like my mother, who sent me a confused email after she saw an article on Semenya, can really understand what this is all about. Instead, the closest we get to the truth was that some of the articles talked about how Semenya has intersex traits or characteristics. So again, like characteristic, it's like, or a trait, it's like, well, if you have like fucking super high test, like could that be the one thing that is, you know, somewhat intersex, but not mentioning the actual like fucking chromosomes themselves, which is obviously an important point. Let's be real. If you're an XY woman, you are the very definition of what virtually everyone would think of as intersex. Because of the glaring XY omission, many across the globe ended up reading opening paragraphs like this from the front page of the New York Times. Female track athletes with naturally elevated levels of testosterone must decrease the hormone to participate in certain races at major competitions like the Olympics, the highest court in international sports said Wednesday in a landmark ruling amid the pitched debate over who can compete in women's events. So again, like this is, again, like what we were reading when we were like, you know, first going through this shit and trying to get the context on the situation. To us, it's just like, oh, these, you know, chicks have way too high of test, but they're naturally blessed. And that's why they have these high levels of test. And we don't know how high they are, you know, it hasn't been told. I'm just assuming, okay, they're probably like what, like 150 or something? Like, I don't actually know because there's no actual statement to say they are they 150 or are they like 500, 600? Like, we don't know. We're just going based off of the vague information provided and the kind of like, you know, conclusions of they're not allowed to compete because too high of test. And like, that's fucking it. But there's a lot more to it for sure. If I had been writing from the New York Times, I'd have added just 6 words and there would have been no confusion as to what really happened. Intersex track athletes with XY chromosomes and naturally elevated levels of testosterone must decrease the hormone to participate in certain races versus women at major competitions like the Olympics, the highest court in international sports said Wednesday in a landmark ruling amid the pitched debate over who can compete in women's sports. This is an incredibly complex issue, and one of the reasons for that complexity is that the IAAF has 2 categories in which athletes can compete, male and female. The problem is, human biology doesn't always neatly divide into male or female. Some people, intersex people, have traits of both sexes. Semenya isn't male, but in addition to Y chromosomes, she is believed to have internal testes and lack a womb or ovaries, characteristics we don't traditionally associate with females. However, you'd likely never know that from reading the coverage in the mainstream press on Wednesday. So here you have the New York Times put Semenya on its front page, but somehow failed to mention that she is XY on the front page. The issue is complex, but nuance matters. Our own title on the homepage of letsrun.com, but the news was originally incorrect. Originally, our headline on the homepage said, Caster Semenya loses CAS case, can only compete in 800 if she suppresses testosterone. A visitor pointed out that title is inaccurate as Semenya was free to compete in the open or men's category without suppressing her testosterone. So we changed it to Caster Semenya loses CAS case, can only compete in women's 800 if she suppresses testosterone. Second point, the Michael Phelps or Usain Bolt genetic outliers argument isn't a good one. Many people who support Semenya use the argument that elite sports are often about genetic outliers dominating, you know, something we just talked about. Usain Bolt had really long legs. Michael Phelps had really long arms, as well as the, you know, fucking sick ankles or whatever it was. So why can't Semenya have really high test? That's a bad analogy. Sports organizations don't classify athletes by arm or leg length, but they do classify athletes by sex. You know, that is indeed true. That's like literally the differentiating factor into what class you will be running in. If they didn't, women wouldn't have a chance to excel at the very top levels of sport, as men's world record are consistently 10 to 12% better than women's world records in sports like track and swimming. In tennis, even a great like Serena Williams admits she couldn't get a game off a top male pro like Andy Murray. If sports organizations didn't classify by sex, there would be almost 0 female Olympians, save for sports like maybe equestrian. There's no human right to compete in a particular category of professional sports. Sports governing bodies exclude certain types of people from certain categories of sports all the time. In boxing, a 210 boxer can't fight as a flyweight, 112-pound max, as the flyweight would have very little realistic chance of winning. To say that an XY human can't compete in the women's category of professional sports unless they lower their test below 5 nanomoles per liter, a figure that is still 7.5 times the value of the average woman competing at the 2011-2013 track and field world championships, and a figure that not a single healthy woman born with XX chromosomes ovaries, and producing estrogen at puberty can reach isn't a huge human rights travesty, it's protection of women's sports. Okay, so if we pull up the unit conversion again, we see that 5 nanomoles per liter, 144 nanograms per deciliter, like we said. So like the average, reference range for females, like we're talking about like, I think it's like 15 to 70. So on the low end 15, high end 70. So the average female though, like I guess somehow they knew what the test levels were of 7.5 times the value of the average woman competing at the 2011 and 2013 track and field championships. I don't know, that seems a bit of an exaggeration likely. I would imagine most are, 40, 50, closer to, maybe 60. Like these are fucking world-class athletes. Like, but still, yeah, they're like, 3, 4, even upwards of 5 times higher the average woman. And yeah, that's, pretty fucking substantial, obviously, at the end of the day. No, intersex people don't make up anywhere close to 1.7% of the population. Being intersex isn't nearly as common as having red hair, but all 3 women's Olympic 800 medalists from 2016 are believed to be intersex. BBC gender and identity reporter Megha Mohan ended her story on Semenya with the following 2 sentences. According to a 2016 report by the UN, between 0.5 and 1.7% of children are born with intersex conditions. For the upper level, that's roughly the same born with red hair. Again, this is totally misleading and biased reporting. The 1.7% figure, this is Semenya in high school apparently, on the left-hand side. Yeah. 1.7% figure comes from a book written by biologist Anne Fausto Sterling in 2000 called Sexing the Body, Gender Politics and the Construction of Sexuality. But Fausto Sterling used a very broad definition of the word intersex, one much broader than she herself used in the past. As Dr. Leonard Sachs has pointed out both on his website and a scientific paper, if you limit the term intersex to its traditional meaning to refer either to individuals who have XY chromosomes with predominantly female anatomy, XX chromosomes with predominantly male anatomy, or ambiguous or mixed genitalia, which is what Fausto Sterling herself did in her 1993 essay, The 5 Sexes, then the rate of intersex births is just 0.018%, less than 2 out of every 10,000 people. And that sounds a lot more realistic, I would say, than 1.7%. The crazy thing about the Semenya case is that even though intersex births like Semenya's are extremely rare, it's believed that all 3 of the medalists in 2016 Olympic women's 800, Caster Semenya, Francine Niyonsaba, and Margaret Wambui are intersex. Yes, all 3. If that doesn't make you understand from a simple odds perspective that there needs to be a limit on testosterone in women's sports, then I don't know what will. Of course, common sense also tells us that most human beings that have XY chromosomes gain a huge advantage in sports once they hit puberty, mainly due to increased testosterone levels. How big of an advantage is it? Well, sports scientist Ross Tucker, who actually testified on behalf of Semenya before the Court of Arbitration for Sport, as he thought one of the IAAF studies used against Semenya was flawed, but also supports, in theory, limits on testosterone for women in sports, has described the presence of the Y chromosome as the single greatest genetic advantage a person can have. Let's conclude the column with an excerpt from what Tucker wrote on the Let'sRun.com forum in 2016. That premise hopefully agreed. We then see that the presence of the Y chromosome is the single greatest genetic advantage a person can have. That doesn't mean that all men outperform women, but it means that for elite sports discussion, that Y chromosome and specifically the SRY gene on it, which directs the formation of testes and the production of testosterone, is a key criteria on which to separate people into categories. So going back to the premise that women's sports is the protected category and that this protection must exist because of the insurmountable and powerful effects of testosterone, my opinion on this is that it is fair and correct to set an upper limit for that testosterone. The advantage enjoyed by a Semenya is not the same as the one enjoyed by, say, Usain Bolt or LeBron James or Michael Phelps, because we don't compete in categories of fast twitch fiber or height or foot size. Pick your oversimplification for performance here. So Semenya has a genetic advantage by virtue of A, having a Y chromosome and testes, and B, being unable to use that T and or one of its derivatives enough to have developed fully male. So yeah, anyway, that is a pretty fucking heavy article with a lot of context in there that most people were probably not aware of, as was I. I didn't know what these testosterone levels were. I didn't know how far above the cutoff they are. And it seems like in the IAAF restrictions, what they concluded was, so basically for you to be able to qualify to compete, New regulations require any athlete who has a difference of sexual development, DSD, means her levels of circulating testosterone are 5 nanomoles per liter or above, and who is androgen sensitive to meet the following criteria to be eligible to compete in restricted events in an international competition or set a world record in a restricted event at competition that is not an international competition. She must be recognized at law either as female or as intersex or equivalent. So they're not ostracizing intersex individuals. They're actually allowed to compete given that they have the testosterone level below 5 nanomoles per liter. She must reduce her blood testosterone level to below 5 nanomoles per liter for a continuous period of at least 6 months by use of hormonal contraceptives, and thereafter she must maintain her blood testosterone level below 5 nanomoles per liter continuously, whether she is in competition or out of competition, for so long as she wishes to remain eligible. So, like, it sounds like, again, to give context here, we have 15 to 70 nanograms per deciliter total test for females, 250 to 1,000 for males. So, you know, like 10 times the fucking production of females. And again, binding protein production. Males produce far less sex hormone binding globulin than females do, as well as the significantly lower amount of estrogen levels that are going to cause disproportionate ratios in androgen to estrogen and binding protein production, etc., which ultimately yields more net free testosterone to actually be biologically active and get to tissues to do what they're supposed to do, which is an even more disproportionately high advantage over the total production. So again, when you're looking at a situation like this, it doesn't sound like it's just a matter of it's a female who is like a biological female with nothing like significantly different whatsoever other than the fact that they are a hyper-responder to manufacturing testosterone, you know, in their body, like whatever it is. They're like a lipid fucking cholesterol hyper-responder and they produce, I don't know, like 100 and, you know, like basically their 5 nanomole per liter cutoff is establishing that it would be impossible to have that testosterone level if you did not have those intersex characteristics where you essentially have like, you know, gonads. Because there are situations where, you know, females do produce super physiological testosterone levels. Again, like I mentioned, you know, there's like the cholesterol hyper-responders, you have individuals with PCOS. But when you get to like 145 nanograms per deciliter plus, it seems like in general, at that point, you've gotten so high that you pretty much weeded out individuals who are like over double the reference range, essentially. Like we're talking 70 is the high end of the reference range. So the equivalent for like a guy, if you're comparing like a 144 to a, you know, top like maxed out girl at 70, like that's the equivalent of comparing like, you know, 1,000 nanogram per deciliter guy to like a fucking like over 2,000, you know? Like obviously it's pretty much impossible for you to have, again, like I have not seen a male, for example, ever produce over 2,000 naturally that didn't have like a tumor or some like major like weird thing going on. And even individual, I've never seen somebody naturally produce over 2,000. And, you know, even in the, I mentioned the 1,600, 1,700 guy that I know personally, that's, you know, a very weird outlier. And it seems like he actually has seems to be benign, but he seems to have a adenoma that was actually confirmed via subsequent imaging after like wondering why his test levels were so fucking high. So like in general, you're not going to see individuals that have, so like, you know, on the male side, like do you ever see somebody producing 2,000 nanograms per deciliter naturally without some sort of, you know, obviously, okay, I'm just trying to give the polar, you know, comparable sides of the equation because a lot of people on my channel know the male levels and they like understand them pretty thoroughly, but relating it to females, like this is the disparity of like literally double the fucking top tier male production. Females, we have 70, 5 nanomoles per liter, we're looking at 144, like we're over double at that point. So it's like the likelihood you could chalk it up to PCOS or, you know, the cholesterol hyper-responders or whatever it is, like it's almost impossible. Like you don't see that. You see in PCOS individuals like on the high end of the double digits still, but you don't see like 150 plus as far as I know. You know, the averages I've seen have not seemed to get that high. So this seems like, you know, they're trying to give leeway here, but not so much that they have to like put a reasonable cutoff in place so then intersex individuals who produce a fuck ton of tests don't just like blow out everyone. So like, I'm sort of like getting the logic here after, and it's just silly how the press releases don't seem to include this information to actually give the context behind like, this individual does not just function based off of ovary hormone production. They have actual internal genitalia that is very, very like it's not the equivalent of fully developed testicles in a male, but it is like you're right in between. Like you're literally intersex. Like that's the, you know, that's what's going on here. So we have an individual who is not, you know, polar opposite side female, not polar opposite side male. Rather, they are somewhere in the middle, maybe leaning, you know, closer to the female side, but they have literally, they have internal testes that are producing hormones in ratios too, with lack of binding protein production and whatnot, that a female simply cannot compete with. So you're like, you know, it's like having a, I don't know, what would the example, well, there is no male example really, because it's like at the end of the, you know, genetic spectrum, even if you had the most hyper elite fucking male, you know, they would be, you know, peaked out at like, you know, in the 1,000+ range, but you're not going to be getting like this kind of a level is not explained. And again, this is assuming they're like right on the cutoff of 145. They could be fucking 500, 600 for all I know, you know, like we don't know what their testosterone level is because it was not specified. Now, the interesting thing is this is the Caster Semenya thing. This is the confirmed that she is, well, it's not confirmed. She's believed to have internal testes and lack of womb or ovaries, but it has been confirmed that she has XY chromosomes. So when you have these individuals that are getting banned as of the other day in their events because of high testosterone levels, it kind of begs the question, like, where is that test level? And is it caused by literal internal gonads? Like, this is the media release for exclusion of the athletes from the 400 meter event. And I was looking for, you know, like details on exactly, you know, if they are an individual who has, like, where does it say here? There's like a specific thing. The DSD covered by the regulations are limited to athletes with 46XY DSD, i.e. conditions where the affected individuals have XY chromosomes. If she wasn't XY, the IAAF's regulations wouldn't apply to her and she'd have no reason to challenge them. Like, I was looking for any indication of differences, you know, in chromosomes, genetic makeup, etc., or an indication of how high the testosterone levels are, and I don't see anything. I just see World Athletics has, according to its procedures stipulated in their rules pertaining to athletes with differences of sex development, required the two athletes amongst other international athletes to undergo medical assessments. Those assessments were done in Italy, where the athletes are currently based in training camp. The results from the testing center indicated that both athletes have a natural high testosterone level. A natural high, so not, you know, synthetic anabolic agents. But like, what does that mean? Like a synthetic high? Like, are we talking about fucking like females with 600 nanogram per deciliter totals? Are we talking about like 146? What are we talking about here? And what is the actual, like, what they're dealing with to produce hormones? Like, do they have ovaries? Do they have testes? Do they have, like, what is going on? Like, obviously you can see where this gets a lot more convoluted than what was once presumed to be a pretty simple, oh, they're just a genetically blessed female who is a, you know, XX chromosome biological female who has just peaked fucking sick test levels and probably is at like 150. No, like, this is like something else potentially. Now, again, these individuals, I don't know if they're in the same camp as Caster Semenya in terms of their chromosomal makeup, how high their testosterone levels are. It's all undisclosed, just up in the air information. So I don't know if it's fair, you know? Like, at first I was like, this is total bullshit, blah, blah, blah. But then it's like, gets to the point where if you have a female who literally has, like, the secret weapon she has is she's literally has testicles producing fucking testosterone, like, it's not really fair, you know? So I don't know what the answer is, but it's not like anyone can really report accurately when none of the details are provided. And I don't know if the athletes even know what the fuck is going on. Like, when they go through the stuff, it says like the athletes like had no idea what was going on. Like, they, you know, like, no one knows what the fuck is going on, dude. Like, I guess at the top they do, you know, the people who are like actually organizing the events and stuff, they obviously have people that are up there to interpret the shit to them and like make an educated decision on what makes sense. But like, I get the, you know, lack of ability to make a conclusive like decision on what is fair versus not fair, because they actually do appear to try and be, you know, inclusive here. Like, she must be recognized at law either as female or as intersex or equivalent, but they have to have the test levels under where you would otherwise only be able to achieve it by having like literal testicles and or like a tumor, essentially. So, you know, like, where do you draw the line? Like, I don't know if we can even answer this question without the details, you know, if it's XY chromosomes, like, you know, that sort of changes the story. Now, one thing I thought was interesting that I thought is probably realistic for, you know, something I think most people would sort of the consensus would say is definitely fair is IAAF doctor predicts intersex category and athletics within 5 to 10 years. Leading scientist at International Athletics Governing Body has said he is in favor of a third category for intersex athletes and that it could happen within 5 years, although he admitted public opinion will have to shift first. My feeling is also the public is not ready for this. We don't want to stigmatize athletes. We also have to take into account religious and cultural sensitivities. So basically I'm in favor, but there needs to be some changes in public opinion. Again, this is, based on the IAAF's, testosterone levels, cutoffs, and having to use fucking anti-androgens to crush it down in order to compete, in the 400 meter to a mile. Females who don't abide by the rules, which come into force on, this was, a couple of years ago, by the way, will still be eligible to compete in non-international competitions or in the male classification. So it's like they're saying, you can still compete, you just got to go compete against guys, or you have to compete in events where I guess this rule has not really come into play essentially, because some of them, you'll note some of these individuals are still competing, they're just doing different events now. And it's kind of interesting how there is different cutoffs for different events. Like the Laurel Hubbard cutoff, if I recall correctly, was like 288 nanograms per deciliter, which is just fucking absurd, with far more lenient exemptions on what you can get away with. And then here, you have to be under 144 nanogram per deciliter for a different duration of time preceding the fucking event. And then some of them, there's like no anything. So again, a lot of fucking leeway to cheat in doping for sure if you know how to manipulate all this stuff. And also a lot of convoluted fuckery going on in terms of like, how do you decide what's fair? And how do you even like have a consensus when public opinion has no idea how to gauge any of this shit when none of the information is publicized? We don't know their testosterone levels. We don't know what their chromosomal makeups are. We don't know anything. We just know they have naturally high test. Like how high, bro? Like I don't fucking know. So what is fair? I don't know now. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. All the comments help the algorithm. They are much appreciated. And if you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic. It's all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home. I recommended lab tests and diagnostics to stay on top of your health, or get assessed for if there are any hormonal interventions or lifestyle changes, or anything that could be associated with improving your quality of life, optimizing and getting high quality oversight concurrently. Like we don't want to just throw you on medications or some shit like some of these companies want to do, the cookie cutters with the test, the HCG, the anastrozole, go home, fuck off. Here's our markup on the medications. We don't care about what happens to you. We don't care about what your blood test levels even were. We're just gonna get you on legal gear essentially. No, we are actually caring about interpreting shit at a high level. That's what we pride ourselves on, is our service and actually providing insight into things that justify the markup of the service itself rather than just the medication. Like we pride ourselves on the actual consultations and providing high quality information and education around the topics rather than just being like, oh, here's your TRT. So we want to give you all the options and all of the different information, all of the information surrounding what your choices could be. What's the most viable options? Why does it make sense? What could you do to intervene in a natural aspect potentially first? All that shit will be accomplished through my clinic. And I highly recommend you check it out if you are interested in anything regarding hormone optimization, health optimization in general. Because even if you're natural, you can still benefit from getting your bloods done on a regular basis, getting high quality diagnostics, and having a doctor overseeing you who actually knows what the fuck they're talking about to make recommendations on basic shit, even dietary intervention, supplementation, lifestyle changes, etc. And then potentially pharmacology if warranted. So check that out if it's of interest to you. Gorilla Mind, nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode, pre-workout formulas designed myself from scratch, and anything else I'm associated with, it's all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.